For 73 years, sealed court records in St. Landry Parish, Louisiana, kept a disturbing secret. When the testimony was finally revealed, 26 women, all former slaves, described identical underground chambers hidden beneath ordinary plantation storage cellars. Each account matched the chilling architectural details: brick archways less than 5 feet high, iron rings embedded in limestone walls, and worn wooden examination tables with leather restraints. This testimony was horrifying, not just for the suffering described, but because of what the women were forced to produce. Medical records discovered later documented a systematic process that transformed human beings into commodities through methods that were entirely legal under Louisiana law until 1865. The architects of this system left behind detailed breeding charts and correspondence, confirming this was not the work of a single madman, but a highly lucrative and calculated business model shared among the state's wealthiest families. In 1837, St. Landry Parish was the peak of Louisiana's cotton economy. The most esteemed property was Bellamont Plantation, a 4,000-acre estate owned by Augustine Deveau, a 47-year-old widower, was celebrated for his business acumen and meticulous control over every aspect of his plantation. His neighbors admired Bellamont's stability, unlike surrounding estates. Its enslaved population of 137 souls seemed remarkably healthy, and grew internally at a rate that defied standard calculations. Between 1825 and 1845, the workforce nearly doubled without significant auction purchases. Deveau's efficient reputation was built on more than just high crop yields. It was built on the root cellar complex he renovated in 1828. Ostensibly for his wine collection, the complex was built with walls 3 feet thick, featured a complex ventilation system, and required 3 separate, discretive entrances. The sophisticated structure impressed his neighbors, who never questioned why such measures were needed for mere preservation. The enslaved community at Bellamont lived under a comparative leniency. Rations were adequate, and there was regular medical attention. This created a powerful control mechanism, the threat of being sold to a neighboring, far more brutal plantation. Yet, behind the facade of stability, certain patterns were visible. Young women, aged 15 to 25, frequently disappeared from fieldwork for weeks or months, only to reappear later, often pregnant. The community whispered, but the terror of separation kept their questions silent. Marie Trosclair arrived at Bellamont in March 1837, purchased for a substantial $800 due to her literacy and skills as a seamstress. The bill of sale also noted her excellent breeding potential. She was assigned to the sewing house, a comfortable, skilled position that gave her hope for a stable life. But her hopes were shattered on a humid late April evening. The overseer, Virgil Landry, came to the sewing house and spoke in a cold, formal tone. "Master Deveau requires your presence in the main house cellar. Bring nothing. Come with me now." Marie followed him in silence, toward the house, towards the elaborate underground chambers that held the plantation's true, dark secret. As the overseer, Virgil Landry, led Marie Trosclair down the brick steps into the underground cellar, she was hit by cool air, carrying a strange medicinal smell. The descent opened into a low-ceilinged corridor, expertly constructed with brick walls and a smooth limestone floor, lit by oil lamps. Beyond a heavy door lay a chamber that defined Bellamont's true purpose. It was a sterile medical room, housing shelves of instruments and chemicals, and a polished wooden table with leather restraints. In the room stood Ellen, a house servant in the late stages of a 4th pregnancy, her face carefully blank. Augustine Deveau was there, writing in a ledger, his manner clinical. Deveau informed Marie that her intelligence and health made her valuable, and that she would either cooperate fully or be sold to the notorious Sunnier Plantation, where mortality was remarkably high. Over the next several hours, Marie witnessed Elon's delivery, assisting Dr. Prudhomme, a thin, detached physician. She learned that Bellamont's profitability was not due to natural reproduction, but to a system of scientific human breeding. Young women were thoroughly examined in the basement chambers, assigned to enslaved men, chosen for desirable traits like strength and temperament, and meticulously documented. The women received superior rations and specialized care, giving birth in the sanitary basement under Dr. Prudhomme's weekly supervision. Deveau, sipping brandy, explained the economics with evident pride. A healthy woman in the program could produce 8 to 10 children during her prime years, at market prices of $600 to $1,000 per child. Each woman represented a profit margin that significantly exceeded cotton. Cotton wears out the soil, DeVoe stated. But this is renewable wealth, self-generating capital. He had created a population custom-designed for specific plantation purposes. Marie's role would involve maintaining the breeding records, using her literacy, sewing special garments, and within the month, entering the program herself. DeVoe reviewed his charts and decided she would be paired with Cyrus, a 32-year-old blacksmith who had already sired 7 healthy children through the system. Returning to her cabin that night, Marie understood her nightmare. Refusal meant sale and a short life. Resistance meant forced restraint. She met the 17 other women in the program, all of whom shared the same distant, psychologically detached look. Claudette, the oldest, at 38, who had borne 9 children, taught Marie the survival strategy. You survive by becoming 2 people, the woman who loves her children and the woman who understands they were never truly yours. Marie soon discovered the basement complex was an extensive network. A medical room, a delivery room, a nursery, a sewing room, and a classroom. DeVoe tracked conception rates, birth weights, and sale prices, with the detail of an industrial process, corresponding with other planters to share data. Every element of chance and individual choice had been removed from human reproduction. Marie's own first pairing was scheduled for a small, Spartan chamber, merely 3 weeks after her arrival. Left alone with Marie, Cyrus, the blacksmith, spoke quietly, acknowledging their shared degradation. This ain't who I am. What we've just done, that wasn't me choosing you, and it wasn't you choosing me. We're both just trying to survive. Cyrus, who had already sired 7 children for the system, explained that he cooperated to keep them alive and prevent his own sale or worse. He endured the horror by reminding himself that resistance would only change who performed the awful task, not the task itself. The enslaved women and men caught in DeVoe's program developed a clandestine community. They shared stories, mourned the children who were sold, and found ways to maintain their humanity despite the constant surveillance. DeVoe's system ensured cooperation through a mix of incentives, better food, lighter work, skilled training for their children, and threats, making outright resistance nearly suicidal. The medical rigor, overseen by Dr. Prudhomme, was chillingly efficient. He used European techniques, including chloroform and antiseptic methods, to personally attend every delivery. This was purely economics. A dead mother meant a significant loss of capital, and DeVoe proudly noted that Bellamont's maternal mortality rate was lower than the parish average. Marie's first pregnancy was confirmed in July 1837. She was moved into the isolation of the basement complex, where she shared a common room with other pregnant women. The routine was structured superior rations, light sewing work, monitored conversations, and weekly, humiliating examinations. By Dr. Prudhomme, the isolation was deliberate, designed to prevent coordinated resistance. Yet, the women resisted in small, internal ways. They communicated through glances, whispered words, and shared mental strategies for survival. Claudette, the veteran of the system, mentored Marie, teaching her to be cooperative but emotionally absent during examinations, and to look past DeVoe during his monthly inspections. You stay alive inside your head, Claudette advised. Even when he owns everything else. In April 1838, Marie gave birth to a healthy daughter after 19 hours of labor, attended by Dr. Prudhomme and DeVoe, who meticulously logged every detail. DeVoe named the infant Desiree, noting her strong features and predicting she would become a valuable servant or breeder. Marie was allowed to hold Desiree for only an hour before the child was taken to the nursery. DeVoe had learned that close bonding reduced future fertility and caused emotional instability, so separation was immediate and absolute. Marie was returned to the pairing rotation 3 months later. By 1840, Bellamont's basement housed 23 women, and the system had expanded. DeVoe had refined his protocols, discovering that pairings between lighter-skinned enslaved people commanded premium prices in New Orleans for house service. This led to a new, calculated layer of dehumanization. where even skin tone became an economic factor in Devoe's terrifying human production line. Augustin Devoe intensified his system by documenting skin tone with the same precision he applied to physical characteristics. He created a detailed scale of gradations and began deliberately pairing people to produce children of specific complexions. His correspondence revealed discussions of human genetics as casually as others discussed cotton seeds, and he traded enslaved men with specific traits with other plantation owners. Devoe's extreme methods were not shocking within the moral framework of antebellum Louisiana. He was simply taking the premise of slavery that people were property to be managed for maximum return to its logical conclusion. Other wealthy planters visited Bellamont, studied his system, and at least 3 adopted similar programs. Devoe maintained control by making the enslaved community complicit. He treated the women in the breeding program marginally better than field workers, ensuring that selection for the basement complex was viewed by some as preferable to the brutal alternatives. By isolating the women from each other and the broader community, he successfully stifled organized resistance. Marie's second pregnancy in late 1840 was a calculated failure. Devoe paired her with a man noted for exceptional mathematical ability, hoping to produce children capable of becoming highly valuable bookkeepers. However, in the 7th month, Marie developed eclampsia. The baby, a boy, was delivered prematurely and survived only 3 days. Devoe noted the financial loss, but meticulously documented the medical failure to refine his protocols and prevent similar complications. During her 4-month recovery, Marie was assigned to full-time rec. This gave her access to the full scope of the system. 31 women had participated, delivering 119 live births. She saw the total revenue of $31,400 generated from 43 sales. Most chillingly, she deciphered coded notations identifying women who attempted became uncooperative, or showed emotional instability. These women were marked for sale, usually to plantations known for working field laborers to death. Devoe had anticipated resistance and built in mechanisms to eliminate it. In 1842, the system faced its first serious external challenge. A woman named Julienne managed to smuggle a letter to Father Antoine Mirier, a Catholic priest visiting the plantation. Father Mirier was horrified, but he knew that Devoe's program violated no statutes. Enslaved people had no legal right to control their own reproduction. Father Mirier confronted Devoe, arguing on moral grounds. Devoe countered with economics and law. The discussion ended in a compromise. Children would not be sold before age 12, allowing for longer contact with their mothers, and the priest could visit quarterly. This accommodation, however, only served to legitimize the system, giving it a veneer of religious sanction and making resistance seem even more hopeless to Marie and the other women. Marie understood that in this system of power, even moral objection ultimately accommodated atrocity. By 1845, Marie had given birth to 3 more children through different pairings. Learning to exist in a state of emotional suspension, she continued maintaining the records, tracking the names, characteristics, and fates of every child born. Her own 4 surviving children, Desiree, Siete, Jean-Baptiste, Cinco, and the twins, Céline and Claire, 3, were being raised in the nursery. They called her Marie, not Mother, as instructed, and were taught that their sole purpose was to serve Master Devoe. Marie witnessed her children develop into quantifiable commodities. Desiree, showing intelligence and strength, was being trained for house service. Céline's musical talent was calculated for its premium value. Jean-Baptiste, showing a remarkable facility with numbers, was being groomed as a highly valuable clerk for rental income. Watching their unique personalities assessed purely for market potential was the cruelest aspect of her life. By 1848, Devoe was running an industrial-scale breeding program. The basement complex had expanded twice, housing 32 rooms. The enslaved population had grown to 214, with 73 births coming from the program. Devoe's reputation and his detailed, efficient system spread, earning him consulting fees from planters in Mississippi, Alabama, and South Carolina, who adopted his model. Visitors admired the system's efficiency, seemingly oblivious to the moral horror. One visitor noted that Devoe had simply perfected animal husbandry principles applied to human beings for reproductive efficiency. Marie, now 30, had endured 11 years and 7 births. While performing her duties, she used her access to the records to maintain a separate, parallel accounting. On scraps of paper hidden beneath her floorboards, she meticulously recorded the children's names, the mothers, the sales, and the separations, a desperate instinct to ensure the truth would be remembered, driven by a profound need for justice. In 1850, everything shifted. Devo, now 60, suffered a stroke that left him. His new son-in-law, Philippi Swello, a young, ambitious New Orleans merchant, took control. Philip viewed the program not as a carefully managed investment, but as a source of liquid capital. He immediately began selling children at younger ages 8, 9, 10 to fund cotton expansion. This acceleration of cruelty, the removal of the minimal protections Devo had maintained, became the breaking point. Claudette, now 51 and considered too old for breeding, had survived the entire 23-year existence of the system. Philippe's decision to sell her 2 remaining children triggered a resistance that had long been suppressed. Claudette began building a network among the women in the program and the broader enslaved community, using coded language and sewing instructions and Bible verses. The plan that emerged was not escape, since escape was impossible for women heavily monitored and tied to the plantation by their children. Marie and Claudette planned documentation and exposure. Their desperate hope was to reach Father Mirier, or a sympathetic outsider who could expose the system and moderate Felipe's cruelty. However, they were betrayed by the house servant, Nicolette. The retribution was immediate and brutal. Philippe gathered the entire enslaved population to witness the punishment. He held up the documents, claiming they were evidence of a conspiracy to steal records and forge escape papers, carefully avoiding any mention of the detailed breeding accounting. Claudette was chained, beaten, and sold the next day to a notorious cotton factor, ensuring she would be worked to death within years. Her 2 remaining children were sold separately. Marie, deemed valuable for her literacy, was not sold. Bud was removed from record-keeping and placed into the pairing rotation full-time. Philippe intensified surveillance, eliminating the courtyard walks and removing all books, effectively turning the complex into a maximum security prison. Father Mirier was barred from visiting, and within a year, his visits ceased entirely. Despite the suppression, Philippe's aggressive, unsystematic sales drew attention. By 1853, the pattern of Bellamont's premium, specialized children being sold at the New Orleans market, attracted the notice of abolitionists. An article in a New York newspaper prompted investigations and concern, forcing Philippe to become even more secretive about his operations. By 1860, the program was in its 3rd generation, tracking hereditary traits across multiple lineages. The Civil War 1861 to 1865 did not immediately end the system, as St. Landry Parish remained under Confederate control for much of the conflict. However, the plantation's economy collapsed. By 1863, the breeding women received poor rations, and medical care became sporadic. Marie, now 43, survived due to her literacy, documenting the plantation's disintegration. The end came in April 1865. Union troops arrived, and federal officials began registering formerly enslaved people. Marie gave testimony to the Freedmen's Bureau, but agents, overwhelmed by the general brutality of slavery across the South, failed to fully document the systematic, scientifically managed nature of Bellamont's program. Philippe, fleeing the advancing Union army, burned most of the basement complex's records, though some survived, scattered in various archives. Marie spent the rest of her life in Opelousas, working as a seamstress and frantically searching for her children. She managed to locate Desiree, Jean-Baptiste, and one of the twins, Claire. Tragically, she never found her other 4 children, including her twin, Selena. Their fates were lost in the chaos of war, existing only as documented births and sale prices in the destroyed records. Marie searched until her death in 1879. The full scope of the Bellamont horror would remain largely suppressed, only to be pieced together decades later through the scattered evidence and the powerful, deliberately suppressed testimony of the women who survived it. Following emancipation, The women who had endured the basement complex scattered. Some, like Marie, stayed to search for lost children, while others fled, desperate to escape any reminder of the years spent underground. The community they had formed, born of shared suffering, dissolved as they pursued individual paths to freedom. The full truth remained buried until 1893, when a water-damaged trunk containing fragments of Agustin Divos breeding records was discovered in the St. Landry Parish courthouse. Black community leaders, recognizing the profound and horrifying nature of the documents, decided to seal them in the courthouse vault. They understood that exposing the intimate, painful details would re-traumatize the surviving women who were still trying to build new lives. Further testimony emerged in 1897 when a visiting historian recorded the experiences of 3 women from Bellamont. These accounts, preserved in the Boston Historical Society, describe the forced pairings, the medical examinations, and the decades spent searching for children and battling the psychological trauma. Ellen Marcel, a survivor, stated, "People think freedom means you leave the past behind, but there are wounds that stay open forever." The breeding program at Bellamont was not unique. Historical research identified at least 33 similar systematic operations across the Deep South. Divos' innovation was the thoroughness of his pseudoscientific documentation. The economic incentive was clear. As the legal international slave trade ended, natural increase became the primary source of labor, and planters who could efficiently produce healthy enslaved children gained a massive financial advantage. The human cost, however, was incalculable. The full scope of these operations was intentionally obscured by former slaveholders, who destroyed records to prevent future judgment. But enough evidence survived, pieced together from fragments, oral histories, and Marie's hidden accounts, which were finally opened to researchers in 1962. This coincided with the release of the sealed 1893 testimony. One final voice emerged in 1963. Louise Thea, an 24-year-old woman born in the basement complex during the program's final years. She spoke not just of the horror and the generational trauma, but of resilience. Her mother taught her that even in the basement, the women found ways to love their children, pass on songs and stories, and maintain dignity that no one could take from them. "We were more than what was done to us," Louise recalled. The Bellamont main house and basement complex were eventually demolished and filled in. But the record of what occurred persists, revealing the logic of treating human beings as property carried to its rational, devastating conclusion. The survivors' insistence on humanity, their resistance in small ways, and their decades-long work to rebuild families affirmed a value and dignity that history must acknowledge.